1. Pain is the catalyst. Every man remembers the exact moment when something inside him shifted. It could have been a text that ended everything, a conversation that turned cold, or simply a growing silence that once felt comforting but now feels distant. Whatever it was, it left you unsettled. It wasn't just about losing someone, it was about losing a version of yourself that you had built around them. That pain you felt wasn't meant to destroy you. It was meant to wake you up. Most people try to escape pain. They look for relationships, endless scrolling, work, or anything that takes them away from facing what's really happening inside. But pain isn't your enemy. It's information. It's a signal that something needs to change. Pain becomes the starting point of your growth. It makes you reflect. It forces you to ask hard questions. What did I ignore? Where did I compromise? Why was I so affected by someone else's actions? This reflection is where transformation begins. In Stoic philosophy, pain is not seen as a failure or weakness. It's seen as a teacher. The discomfort you feel shows you where you were too attached, too dependent, or too hopeful in things beyond your control. And when you begin to understand that, you start to shift your energy inward. You focus on building yourself instead of trying to fix or win someone back. Let me know when you want. Point no. 2. Explained in the same tone and format. 2. The power of complete silence when a relationship ends. The most natural instinct is to respond, to reach out, to explain, to ask questions. You want to be understood. You want closure. You want to express everything that was left unsaid. But often, this urge to speak only prolongs your attachment and confirms to the other person that they still occupy space in your world. True power, in moments like these, comes from doing the opposite. Silence is not about being cold or distant. It's about being intentional. It's choosing not to invest any more of your emotional energy into something that no longer gives back. When you remain silent, not out of anger, but out of clarity, you create space for understanding. Not just for them, but for yourself. Most people are not used to silence. They expect a reaction. They expect words, and when none come, it creates a different kind of awareness. It invites reflection. It forces the other person to sit with their own thoughts, without being distracted by your responses or emotions. But silence is not just about them, it's primarily about you reclaiming your peace. Every message you don't send, every thought you don't act on, is a moment of discipline. You're learning to manage your emotions instead of being controlled by them. You're placing boundaries where there once were none. Over time, this silence begins to speak for you. It communicates self-respect. It says, I will not chase someone who isn't willing to stay. It reminds both of you that you deserve a connection rooted in mutual effort, not one-sided pursuit. Silence isn't absence, it's presence, your presence with yourself. And in that quiet, you begin to rebuild. 3. Starver of your attention. Your attention is not just time, it's value. It's your focus, your mental energy, your emotional presence. When you constantly gave that attention without boundaries, it slowly lost its meaning. Not because it wasn't genuine, but because it was too available. And what is always available is rarely appreciated. This point is not about punishment, it's about realignment. When someone becomes used to your constant attention, your replies, your presence, your emotional availability becomes expected. It stops being something they cherish and starts being something they assume will always be there. That's when your attention starts to lose its power. Now it's time to protect that energy. You're not ignoring them out of anger. You're simply no longer investing your energy where it's not reciprocated. You stop checking in. You stop watching their updates. You stop showing up where you're no longer valued. Not because you're trying to make a point, but because you're finally prioritizing yourself. This withdrawal may go unnoticed at first, but slowly, the absence becomes noticeable. Not because of drama, but because of the lack of emotional supply they once depended on. That shift isn't about control, it's about growth. Your attention is fuel. It either drives your personal development or keeps others comfortable at your expense. When you redirect that attention inward toward your goals, your discipline, your future, you begin to feel stronger, more focused, more grounded, and that is when your presence becomes rare, not out of pride, but out of purpose. You're not cutting people off, you're simply no longer giving what wasn't respected. When your attention becomes intentional, it regains its value, and those who took it lightly may come to realize its worth, but by then, you've already moved on. With peace. 4. Emotional detachment is dominance. There's a common misunderstanding about detachment. that it means you no longer feel, or that you've become cold. But emotional detachment isn't about not caring. It's about caring in a balanced, disciplined way. It means you've stopped allowing your emotional state to be dictated by someone else's actions or absence. When you detach emotionally, you're not avoiding feelings, you're choosing how and where to direct them. In a world where overreaction is common and emotional impulsiveness is seen as strength, choosing calm is rare. When you no longer respond to every message, every provocation, or every shift in someone else's mood, you reclaim control. That's where real strength begins. Detachment gives you clarity. It allows you to see the situation for what it is, not what you hoped it would be. It breaks the emotional loops that used to trap you where you were trying to explain, prove, or win back something that was slipping away. You don't win by being louder or more emotional. You win by stepping back, seeing the full picture, and choosing peace over reaction. This doesn't mean you didn't care, it means you finally chose to protect the part of you that was always overextending. And that changes everything. Because the moment you stop reacting, you become unpredictable, you become centered. You no longer give others the ability to control your emotional weather. You become steady, calm and focused. That calm presence is what defines emotional dominance. Not control over others, but control over yourself. When you reach this point, people notice the change. They may not understand it, but they'll feel it. And the person who once knew you as reactive or emotionally available may begin to question, what changed? The answer is simple. You grew. You no longer hand your emotional peace to anyone else. 5. Rebuild in the shadows. There is quiet strength in stepping away from the noise, not to disappear, but to rebuild. After emotional setbacks, many people rush to prove something, posting updates, seeking attention, trying to show how okay they are. But true growth rarely happens in public. It happens in silence, in solitude, in the moments no one sees. To rebuild in the shadows means you are focused on your personal evolution, not for validation, not for revenge, but for yourself. You begin to change your habits. You reflect deeply. You recenter. You take small, disciplined steps toward becoming mentally stronger, physically healthier, and emotionally more grounded. There's no need to announce this process because growth speaks for itself when the time is right. You don't need to update anyone. The people who truly mattered will eventually sense the shift in your presence, and those who once took you lightly will only hear about it when the difference becomes undeniable. This silent rebuilding phase also protects your peace. You're not comparing your journey to others. You're not distracted by outside noise. You're focused inward. Every book you read, every moment of discipline you choose, every time you sit with your emotions instead of reacting, that's the real work. That's transformation. And when you re-emerge, you won't need to say much. Your energy will speak. Your calm will be louder than words. Your new presence won't be rooted in bitterness, it'll be rooted in self-respect. In a world where people constantly chase attention, choosing to grow quietly sets you apart. So let others wonder. Let them make assumptions while they guess. You grow quietly, consistently, in the shadows where real change always begins. *6. Scarcity makes you valuable. What is rare is often respected. What is always available tends to be taken for granted. This is a quiet truth that applies not only to time and resources, but also to people. When you were always accessible emotionally, physically, or digitally, you made it easy for others to overlook your value. Not because you had no worth, but because you never gave them a chance to feel your absence. Constant presence dulls appreciation. It creates the illusion that your energy is endless and guaranteed. But the moment you pull back, not with resentment, but with self-awareness, you shift the balance. Scarcity doesn't mean cutting people off. It means becoming more intentional. With your energy, it means showing up where you're respected, not where you're tolerated. It's not a strategy to get someone's attention. It's a decision to return to yourself. When people can no longer expect your constant attention, when they notice the calm void where you used to be, they begin to reconsider. Not because you forced them to, but because your absence created space for reflection. This is the power of scarcity. It invites others to measure your presence, to remember your consistency, to see what life feels like without your emotional investment. It's not manipulation. It's a reminder that value isn't in how much you give, but in how wisely you give it. And in that space of scarcity, something changes within you too. You realize you don't need to prove your worth. You simply need to protect it. You stop over-explaining, stop chasing, stop overgiving. You conserve your energy for things that truly matter. Scarcity is not about playing games. It's about knowing that your time, your presence, and your peace are not things to be handed out without thought. They are earned. 7. Silence over explanation. There comes a time when explaining yourself no longer serves you. When you've said all there is to say through your words, your actions, your patience, and it's still misunderstood, ignored, or taken lightly, silence becomes the higher path. Choosing silence isn't weakness, it's maturity. It means you've stopped arguing for your value. It means you're no longer in the business of convincing anyone of your worth. When someone truly sees you, no longer explanation is needed. When they don't, no amount of clarity will change that. Silence, in this context, is not about shutting people out. It's about stepping back from trying to be understood by those who aren't listening. Many people fear silence because they think it signals defeat. But silence often signals self-respect. It says, I've said what I needed to say. Now, I choose peace over performance. You don't owe anyone a detailed exit. You don't need to explain every boundary you set. When you stop over-communicating your pain, you preserve your dignity. You protect your energy. Silence also allows space for reflection, for recalibration, and sometimes for others to truly feel your absence. People often hear you more clearly when you stop talking. They notice more when your energy is no longer there to fill the room, respond to messages, or soften their mistakes. It's not about being passive. It's about choosing when to engage and when not to. Some situations don't deserve your emotional labor anymore. And here's the truth. Silence can't be misquoted, twisted, or debated. It simply exists, saying that alone carries a weight far greater than repeated explanations ever could. When words no longer serve, let your silence speak. Often, it says everything. 8. Presence without attachment. 2. Be present without becoming attached is one of the highest forms of emotional strength. It means you can share your time, attention, and care without letting your peace depend on someone else's actions or approval. Many people confuse presence with possession. They believe being close to someone means clinging to outcomes, needing constant reassurance, or depending on the other person to validate their worth. But true presence doesn't require control, it requires self-awareness. You can be fully engaged in a moment, appreciate someone deeply, and still remain grounded within yourself. You give out of intention, not out of insecurity. You connect, but you don't cling. This mindset frees you. It allows you to love, help, support, or walk alongside someone without losing your identity in the process. And if that connection fades, you don't collapse, you reflect, you adjust, you move forward. Attachment is rooted in fear, the fear of loss, the fear of being alone, the fear that you're not enough without someone else. Presence, on the other hand, is rooted in self. You show up, give what feels right, and stay true to yourself regardless of how the other person responds. When you master presence without attachment, people can feel the difference. You're not desperate for their attention. You're not emotionally dependent on their reactions. You become a calm, steady presence in a world full of emotional extremes. And paradoxically, this makes you more attractive, not because you're trying to be, but because your energy is whole, self-contained, and at peace. This is what it means to remain emotionally available without being emotionally dependent. You're there but not lost. You care but you're not controlled. You give but never at the cost of your own center. That is the power of presence without attachment. 9. Let her feel the distance sometimes. Distance says what words never could. It creates the space necessary for someone to truly notice what you brought into their life, not through guilt, not through pressure, but through reflection. When you step back, you're not punishing anyone. You're simply removing your constant energy, your presence, your availability. That space can feel quiet at first, almost unnoticed, but in time, it echoes. It becomes a mirror. She begins to feel the difference. Not because you're trying to cause pain, but because you've taken your emotional investment back to where it belongs, within yourself. You are always there, supporting, caring, consistent. But when someone doesn't fully see or value that, continuing to pour yourself out doesn't change the situation. Distance, on the other hand, often does. It's not about being cold or distant for the sake of power. It's about allowing someone the freedom to realize things on their own. It's about understanding that forced presence often leads to resentment, from both sides. True emotional maturity means knowing when to give and when to pull back. Letting her feel the distance is not about hoping she chases you, it's about detaching from the need to be seen in the way you once hoped for. Distance gives both of you clarity. It allows her to feel, not just think, what life is like without your daily presence. And in that space, realizations are born. Maybe about your consistency, maybe about the calm you brought, maybe about the way you made her feel safe. But more importantly, it allows you to see yourself more clearly, truer, worth your boundaries, your peace. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply step away, let her feel the distance. Let time and silence do what words never could. Point 10. Your evolution is the closure knot. Every story ends with a conversation. Sometimes, the closure you're looking for doesn't come from her words, it comes from your growth. There will be moments in life when people walk away without explanation, when things are left unresolved, when you don't get the apology, the honesty, or the clarity you thought you deserved, and it hurts. Because you cared, because you gave your best. But here's the truth. You don't need closure from someone who couldn't give you consistency when it mattered. You don't need final words from someone who didn't value your presence when they had it. What you need is evolution. Your growth, your healing, your discipline, your silence that becomes the closure. Not because you forced it, but because you realized your peace is no longer dependent on someone else's recognition. The best way to move on is not through bitterness. It's through becoming better. You detach, you improve, you redirect your energy into your purpose, your health, your self-respect, and gradually, you stop needing to look back. Because forward is where the strength is now. Closure doesn't always come in the form of a final talk. Sometimes, it shows up quietly, when you no longer overthink the past, when your heart beats calmly where it used to ache, when you can wish them well without needing to reconnect. That's closure. Let her wonder, let her reflect, let her remember, but you keep growing. Every version of you that's more grounded, more self-controlled, more focused, that's proof you've already closed that chapter. Not with anger, but with wisdom. In the end, your evolution will speak louder than any goodbye ever could, because nothing says "I've healed" more powerfully than becoming someone who no longer needs what once broke him.